Thank you for tuning into the Just Believe Show. I'm your host, Herbie Mack. Today I'm honored. I have a phenomenal guest in Deryl Glaze. He is a addiction expert, motivational coach, and recovery speaker. You know, for myself, I battled with addiction, and it was kind of hard to navigate on my own. And I do have some tips, but you know what? I wanted to bring an expert on to not only talk about the signs of it, how to, navigate somebody through it. Like, hey, this is a resource that you can use, but also how can I support them afterwards or just even along that journey. Deryl not only provide those tips and whatnot, he also opened up and shared his story that led him to become this expert. I had an amazing time with him, hoping that you enjoy the episode. And here we go.
Well, once again, thank you for having me on the show. My name is Deryl Glaze. I'm a motivational coach and addiction recovery expert. And I didn't get here just because I thought it was a cool thing to do. I got here because I had to come to a realization, and I'll start with my story. I grew up on the south side of Chicago originally. Lived there for years. Grew up in a home with basically single. Back in those days, in the mid '60s and early '70s, it was more of you may have been in a single parent home, but for a lot of cases, you had grandma there too. So I grew up in a home with both mom and grandma there, and they were responsible for raising me as a black man, and which wasn't necessarily an easy thing to do, especially since there was a separation in our lives. And the separation in our lives was the fact that I stayed in a foster home from the age of 4 to the age of 9. And that caused a huge separation. I would see my mother like maybe every weekend or every other weekend, but I stayed in this foster family home, which was in a duplex, which had about somewhere they put about 18 to 19 kids in it. And in that process, back in those days, foster homes and things weren't really regulated. So it was like, look, if you could take this joke off the street, let's go with that. So that's kind of like how it was. It was kind of like more like a glorified babysitter, if you want. But the thing that was interesting about it is that in that process, there was a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, and a lot of me wanting to be distant. But the thing I developed most in that area was separation and also hiding. I got real good at hiding things. I got good at hiding my emotions. I'm good at hiding my affections. And most importantly, I got good at hiding homework, as I tell people all the time. And in that process, I began to develop take that new skill of hiding things and would hide it in certain areas of my life with lies and deceptions and things of that nature. Well, fast forward as I was able to come back home, and then as I began to get into my early teenage years, a good buddy of mine, his brother actually taught us the skill of smoking weed. And that was a whole nother deal for me. And the thing that was interesting is that I really didn't enjoy weed as much as I enjoyed alcohol. The way I started drinking alcohol was that I remember the day back in the old days, and old folks used to do this, but when you wanted your kids to go to bed early, especially during Christmas, and everybody wanted to drink eggnog, you put a little spike in that thing, man, and then you're in it for about maybe 5-10 minutes, and then you're out like the light, So that was kind of a contributor. It led me to going back and sneaking in my grandmother's bedroom and tipping a little bit of the Crown Royal that she used to keep on out by her bedside, by her chair in the bedroom. So I used to do that. And that kind of led to, as I got older, to start wanting the desire to drink more and harder liquor. I was never much into beer, but I was more into like the hard liquor. Fast forward from there, what began to happen is that I realized I needed to change, but the stuff that I had been masking, the emotional, the issues were my anger and things like that were developing on a regular basis. Those are things that I was trying to hide. So as I was an adult, now living in Minnesota, and I would pull disappearing acts whenever things got to be too tight. Whether I was in a job and I lost my job, or whether I was in a relationship and that went bad, I always found ways to heal by grabbing alcohol and running this way or into a certain relationship that was also even more devastating than the last one. And it just was this perpetual cycle. I would disappear, then show up, disappear. I would disappear for anywhere from maybe 2 weeks to one time I was gone for 2.5 years. And in the process, and the biggest thing was, and in this process, is that it was something that I just didn't want to bring to the forefront. Interestingly enough, not too long ago, I had a dinner with a couple of years ago now with a couple of cousins who I grew up with, and we were real close. We were more like brothers. And the question came up about one of our other cousins who had a huge major and still to this day battling addictions, and how he would go around and try to borrow money from family, break into houses of family members, all kind of stuff. And I said, see, that's one of the reasons why I never brought my addiction out and I just disappeared, because even in my dysfunction, I didn't want to hurt anybody. And that was a piece that a lot of people don't understand. Even when I explained it to them today, it was like, well, most of the time when you're in addiction, man, you hurt people. How come you didn't want to go out? How come you wasn't, like a bull in a tire shop? I was, but I was in a totally different way. I didn't hurt the people who were close to me because I didn't want them to know what I was dealing with. Okay, so literally, I got to a point where I wound up. I know I needed help, so I checked myself into a 45-day program. And I was one of those rare occasions where a guy goes into a program and he's one and done. Going to one program, you're all done, and you don't have an issue anymore. And that's kind of how it was for me. However, the thing that I did not realize is that I had a deeper problem, and it was my anger issue, was my emotional outburst, issues that were going on a regular basis. That was bigger and became bigger than the actual addicted to alcohol. And it was definitely something that I understood later on, that it had to do a lot with mental illness and some of the issues that I was dealing with, separation from my mom back when I was in the foster home, to having my dad inconsistently in my life, to a lot of other things and traumas that I experienced throughout the way, but didn't identify them as traumas because back in those days, you didn't talk about that stuff.
It stays in his house. What happens in his house stays in his house.
Exactly. I mean, we had that slogan before Vegas. You know what I'm saying? So it was, so you knew that it's like, no, we don't talk about this. And it's not like I grew up growing up on the South Side of Chicago, it wasn't like I was in this real poor neighborhood. I was in literally a working class neighborhood. People went to work every day. They came home every day. We had a few people that was doing stuff that they, do what people do, whether it was using or selling drugs, whatever the case may be. But the majority of the people in the neighborhood actually worked, and everybody had their issues, whether you had domestic assault going on in one house or people drinking too much in another house. Everybody had their own issues and whatever they were coping with and dealing with. But no matter what, it was always considered to be hidden, and nobody ever brought it out into the light. So that's how that was the message that we understood and knew, and we didn't go down that road. So when I decided to get this thing done, I literally went off and started building a career in both the mortgage industry and the banking industry and a couple of other things. I had a couple of businesses and what have you in the process, and they kind of failed and things of that nature. But I kept going on. I never went back to that addiction of using alcohol again. However, the emotional issues did not subside, and that was the thing that actually cost my first marriage, because of my own emotional issues, because of my own outburst and anger, to the point where she said this was too much for me to handle, gotta go. So that went down that road. Never dealt with it until later on in life. I started actually talking with somebody and started sharing about some of the things that I've been dealing with, and that literally led me to get into the addiction field, which is interesting in itself. Literally going through that process of going into the addiction field. That was not something that if somebody would have told me, hey, you're going to be working with people who struggle with drug addicts, I would have said, I don't know what you smoking, but that ain't happening. And I was just very, very candid about that. But now I've been doing this for over 20 years. I get the opportunity to see men and women grow. There's a lot of successes, but there also is a lot of failures in the process too. And it's knowing how to get through that and navigate through that and being able to help someone and keep your own mental health intact is something that you must pay close attention to as you go through the process.
I'm glad you said that. First and foremost, I'm glad that you was able to overcome those demons. I know it's difficult, especially you going back in the 60s and 70s where no one was really talking about mental health was something that nobody knew about, let alone talk about. And
Hmm.
even now, like as we keep moving and evolving as people, you're starting to see people normalize the conversation. And I always tell them that not everybody who goes through a mental health challenge, and for that it's 1 out of 5 people, which is about 20%, that goes through experience a mental health challenge every year, and not everyone is going to have a happy ending, right?
Right.
And some people lean towards addiction, whether it's whatever substance they decide to choose. And
Hmm.
that's why I find it highly important to have this episode and this conversation, because if I can just do my part to just help this one person who's struggling, I'll feel complete. And I just want to give people hope, and I want them to believe in themselves. So as we shift gears just a little bit, let's talk about the substance abuse of the numbers ever since the pandemic. I know you told me some amazing numbers, and I really can't wait to hear.
Well, where we saw the biggest increase during the pandemic is that literally the addiction, substance use went up to over 500% during the pandemic. And there are a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons for that. However, some of the major reasons behind it is that people who were in recovery, we saw a lot of people relapse, and a lot of reasons why that was because there was nowhere for them to meet anymore. I mean, your AA meetings, NA meetings no longer were available in person, where you had that belly to belly experience of being able to share with somebody and be able to have that human understanding and relationships. Now, there were some meetings that went online. I knew some people who were very successful with meetings online, but I knew a vast majority who were not. I heard a story not too long ago where a young man said that he said, "Man, they said I was in my outpatient program, and they had 30 of us on Zoom. I would turn my camera off so I take a hit of my hit a dope and that kind of thing and what have you because there was no accountability." The accountability that we needed during that time was not there. So you have more people overdosing and dying. You have more people going through the struggles in the process. So when you take away that accountability, that's one of the one things that happened. I think it was a statistic that came out back in 2017 or 18, where literally substance abuse cost the taxpayers somewhere in the neighborhood of $43 billion.
Yeah, it was
And when you
2018.
start, yeah, and when you start looking at that, you start saying to yourself, "My God, man, it's like do we really realize how big of an epidemic how big of an epidemic this is?" And then when you take a pandemic and put it on top of it, it just increases the numbers even more to the point that people aren't getting the help that they need. So we put ourselves in this position and wonder what can we do? What can we do in this situation? And it gets hard. I work for an intense inpatient treatment center here in Minnesota, one of the top in the five state area, and literally we see people come and go all the time. You'll see a guy who maybe work his way all the way through the program, and then to go out and then only to come back 6 months to a year, 2 years later, and you wonder, you have had to think about what happened, what led you to get back to this place. Because I've always found that fascinating, and I had to make sure to not judge or jade myself in the process because like I said, I was that one and done guy. But people will have to understand, man, is that addiction is not it's a very hard thing to break, and it's not easy. It's about retraining yourself on how to make sure you make the right decisions every day, all day.
Yes, no, you're right. When it comes to, I find it so much easier when you have someone that can hold you accountable, but you also have that support team,
Hmm.
right? When those days are rough and you just, look, man, I just got to vent to you. Oh, this is what's going on. This is my struggle that makes me want to get that hit or that drink. It makes life a little easier, in that aspect of knowing that someone is there in your corner. When you're struggling, you don't have that person that's rooting for you, you don't find hope in yourself at all. You're just like, whatever, I'm just whatever.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a known statistic that 40 to 6% of people that dabble in substance abuse will always go back to it. However, when a person has any kind of support of any kind, the numbers drop dramatically. They drop dramatically because of that support system. And so you just imagine that now we went into a pandemic and nobody's getting the support that they need. Nobody's getting the services that they need because they're no longer available due to restrictions and that kind of thing. So everything is either delegated online, and some people didn't have the mental capacity to handle just online meetings. Okay, so they went through consequences, they suffered and went through all kind of mess because of it. And trying to recapture that now that things opening up, a lot of people are having a hard time trying to make that transition again.
Yes, yes, yes. I want to ask you, what is some of the signs that someone is addicted to whatever substance?
One of the things that leads that people can, as a telltale sign, is that separation. When a person makes the decision to isolate themselves, and it's not normally part of their way of doing things, it's always good to call, check on them, and see how they're doing. If you're in the presence of a person, all of a sudden they seem to be kind of jittery or kind of eyes wide open, so to speak, or be at a point where they see they can't sit still and they're just all over the place. That could also be a telltale sign. Then the obvious signs where you have bloodshot eyes and things of that nature, those are always good telltale signs. But one of the things that we're seeing now when it comes to telltale signs is that people not understanding, what it is they're dealing with, and they're just not being able to cope with life right now. So that's always a good indicator when people start getting into that position as well. But like I said, one of the great telltale signs of, like I said, is when people begin to separate, when they begin to isolate, when they begin to not reach out, or when they begin to just disappear. This is where that if you have any concerns with anybody, you want to go ahead and reach out to them, and you want to find out, hey, how's it doing? Are you doing okay? I haven't heard from you in a while. What's going on? So it's always good to do that. Now, if you go to the other side of the table where somebody who was in substance abuse and maybe they've gotten out of it, if you're looking for telltale signs of when they might go back or maybe they have gone back, look at patterns of behavior, and then be that person that steps up and says to that person, hey man, you're not yourself today. Tell me, are you getting high? Just be flat out honest with them. Some people think that, when you do that, you put them into a whole state of mind. No, sometimes you got to do that. You got to be direct about it. And the more direct you are, the more open they can become. And if they're not open about it, that's also a telltale sign that there's something more going on. Because if they don't have anything to hide, they're not going to be offended by you asking that question. They may be a little taken back, but they won't be offended.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah. It's very similar to when someone is struggling that's having like suicidal ideation. Like I tell people, just ask them. Based off their answer, they're going to let you know. And sometimes that's what they mean. Thank you for asking. Yes, I am struggling. I decided to take that hit. I decided to pour that drink. So it's very simple. I always say ask. And when someone does and they tell them, like, I am struggling, I started drinking or I started taking this hit of whatever substance, what advice would you tell them to do next?
Then what I would do is that when I coach people who decide to help somebody through the recovery journey, one of the things I tell people is that if you are used to dealing with people who struggle with substance abuse, two things. One, once you ask them that question, if they're struggling, if they admit to struggling, then talk to them about, okay, let's look at options. Do you know you need help? You've been down this road before, so we're not going to say, oh, do you think you need help? No. You've been down this road before. Let's get you the help you need. I used to coach people is that if you got somebody like that in your life, get a list of treatment centers, get a list of operations that can actually help them, whether it's inpatient or outpatient or a counselor, whatever it is. have something in hand so you can sit there and walk them through making those phone calls. And what I used to always do is that, look, I was like, look, I'm here to support you, but I can't make the call for you. If you want this, you got to do this. This is on you to do, but I am here. I'm going to support you throughout this journey. So you have them make the phone call and have the assessment done, have them talk about what it is they're dealing with. And the professional on the other end of the phone can tell them what the best course of action can be in that process.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for that. I wanted to make sure people got that. When you see them like recovered, right? You see them during their recovery journey and they seem back to normal. Now, are you always, for someone, should they always be worried that they might fall off, or should they just sit there and just support as much as possible?
You want to be as supportive as possible. I mean, statistics show that the average person has to, I mean, this is a startling statistic within itself when you think about it, but the average person who goes through a treatment program relapses 7 times before they finally get it right. Now, the scary thing about that is that who's to say they're going to make it 7 times, first and foremost. Second thing is that why do we have to wait to get to that number? What can we do what's the best course of action that we can do to help somebody in this process? So from a standpoint of understanding that you are going to be in this person's life, if that's what you choose to do, then have regular check-ins. Get together with them once a week for coffee, once a month for coffee, whatever it is, but have regular check-ins with them. One of the things I always talk about is that, being a person that's in recovery or working with somebody that's in recovery, you got to start finding out what their routine is going to be to maintain their sobriety. What's their game plan? Help them establish a game plan and help them stick to it by keeping them accountable to that actual game plan. So whatever that game plan is, okay, now that you got this new life of sobriety, what's the game plan to maintain it? And I think a lot of times we realize that what happens is that we short-sight ourselves. And what I mean by that is this, is that we think that it's all about the sobriety, and it's not. It's about recovery. Here's the difference. The difference being is sobriety is literally just dragging it out without humility. When you talk about recovery is a lifestyle. So if you understand recovery as being a lifestyle, it's not just about trying to maintain your sobriety. It's about thriving in life. What's next on the agenda? Are you going back to school to get that GED or get that degree? Are you going to start that business? What's next or down the road for your life? One of the great stories that I love is a young man who literally was incarcerated. He was in prison for a number of years, but he always wanted to be a heavy equipment operator. But one of the things he had to do is he had to complete drug treatment program that was like 13 months long. And in this process, he literally made up his mind he was going to be a heavy equipment operator. Because of his felonies, it was always hard for him to get a job actually doing it. But after he finished treatment, and before he finished treatment, he saw it before he actually attained it. So what he did when he got into treatment, he got a picture of a bulldozer and put it above his bed. So he saw it every single night. And he made that his number one priority. He knew this was going to be his ticket in order to get his son back in his life, the whole 9 yards. So when he finished, he went through a program. I think it was an 8 to 16 weeks long program where he learned how to do heavy equipment operation and that kind of thing. However, when he finished the program, the only jobs he could ever get was kind of what they call grunt work when it comes to construction workers. So he never got that opportunity until one day, a guy didn't show up to drive the bulldozer. He kept telling the boss he could. They need to get this project done. He wasn't unionized to be able to drive it, but they took the risk anyway. And he got on that thing and he killed it. I mean, he did a great job. And he did such a good job that he continued in that process. He got hired on other jobs driving bulldozers. And then he went back and started teaching other young kids on how to drive bulldozers, their process as well. That's what I'm talking about. What's next in the journey? Okay, now I got this new life in sobriety. What's next? What value am I going to add to my life? So now I'm not just living in sobriety, but now I'm building a recovery lifestyle.
No, I love it. Powerful story. It's important to have a vision board. Even for myself, I'm in my office now and I have 3 vision boards up, right? One is a what I'm going to achieve this year, what I'm going to achieve in the next 3 years and 5 years. And I think it's
Hmm.
important because if you don't see it, how can you achieve it?
That's
You
right.
know? So I really find it highly important. Even when I work with people, my clients, and I tell them, hey, you might want to have a vision board. And they don't understand the importance of planning. I'm glad that you said that. Before we wrap this up, if there's someone that's listening to this and struggling, what would you tell them?
When you start feeling like that you're hopeless or you feel like there's no hope, always understand is that you are decision, one decision from turning this thing around. And it's all in reaching out. Find somebody that you can reach out to. 9 times out of 10, you already know who that person is or people are. Find somebody you can reach out to. Don't if you're sitting there listening and you're going like, I don't know what to do with myself, make that decision to do something. Make that decision. Whether you're worried, reach out to Herbie or reach out to an organization, reach out to somebody, let them know you're struggling so they can get you the right information in your hand to get the help you need. See, because when you isolate, when you don't communicate, nobody can help you. Okay. And you got to put yourself in a position where you can reach out and get the help you need. It's not easy, but that's where the first step of bravery starts for the new change in your life.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Before we go, please tell the audience where to find you.
You can find me at www.deryl.com or www.derylglaze.com. Sorry about that. You can always find me there. I have two motivational. I have a YouTube channel called Motivation to Recovery. It's for people who actually are in recovery but need to get into a place where they need to stay motivated on a regular basis. How that came about was that back in 2012, a friend of mine we were talking, it's like, how come we're seeing all these people relapse? All these people falling off and going back to using again. So I went on a journey. I sat down and had coffee with about 20 recovering addicts. I'm sorry, I'm going to rephrase that. Close to 100 recovering addicts. And in a 3-year period, and I sat down with ones who were very successful and the ones who weren't very successful at all. And what the difference in the two was astonishing. The ones who were not successful focused only on their sobriety. They focused only on trying to stay sober. And it became so much either boring or mundane, or it got to the point where it was like it drove them literally batty to just focus on that and not have something more in their life. However, the ones who focused on the fact of building a life, which is a life of recovery, and they begin to add value to your life, whether they, like I talked about before, getting that degree or GED or starting that business. The people who did that had significant success in their recovery program. They didn't stop going to meetings. They didn't stop going to the support groups. They kept going, doing the things they do, but they added to it. And that, Herbie, that's one of the things that most people in recovery don't understand. They think you can only focus on that one thing so you don't fall off. No, you can do more than that. Okay, Einstein says we only use literally 10% of our brain, which means you got 90% to play with. You can do more than just sitting there and just focus on not trying to use. Part of your sobriety is understanding is that you can do more, which leads to your recovery. Okay. But when you start doing more, you start realizing that recovery becomes the byproduct and not the norm.
Thank you. Thank you.
It becomes the byproduct, which
Man,
means it becomes automatic part of your actual DNA.
yes.
Because you're focusing on building you as a whole person. Okay. If you don't mind, I'll share one story and close.
Yeah. Let's go.
There was a young lady that I ran into a number of years ago, and I knew her when she was in treatment, when she was in a bad way. I remember her story when she told me her success. I remember it immediately took me back to her story. I remember when she was in intense inpatient treatment. She didn't have a whole lot of skills, but one of the things she always wanted to do is she wanted to write and have a poem published. She wanted to be a published poet. And when she got out of treatment, that was her focus. She still did mean did what she needed to do in order to make sure she could maintain, walking in that new lifestyle. But that was a passion of hers. So she started asking questions. Where can I get my poem published? Well, people didn't know where to point it to, but they told her about this organization where they literally they're a playhouse. So she didn't know what else to do. So she went over there and just got a chance to talk to somebody and tell her story. And they told her, you know what? We have a monthly newsletter that we send out to the neighborhood about plays and stuff that we have coming up. You know what? Let's change it. Let's put a little something there. Let's publish a couple of poems in there. And they did. And when they published a couple of her poems, people in the neighborhood started writing in and talking about how much they really appreciated her. They made her part of their writing team. And one of the things that they did is they wrote a play about her story. About her story.
That's incredible.
Okay. And that's what I'm talking about. You don't know the gifts and talents that we have on the inside of us. A lot of it is covered up by our addiction. And because it's covered by our addiction, we never get the opportunity to shine the way we've been had the opportunity to. So that's why it's so important to realize it's not about walking in sobriety. It's about walking a recovery. It's about walking a recovery lifestyle.
Thank you. Thank you.
So in that process, like I said, that when I asked this question, what caused me to start my business literally was that I was like, people, when I found out and I did that, I sat down with those 100 recovering addicts. I realized the fact that the ones that were successful made the decision to be successful. The ones who didn't just focused on sobriety. So I said, you know what? I want to help people stay focused on staying motivated. So I came up with a lecture series called Motivation Through Recovery. I started sharing it at the treatment center I worked at. They wanted me, then all of a sudden my director, he wanted me to do more of them. And then I started sharing them with other treatment centers. They started finding out about them and I started sharing them with more and more and more. And then somebody actually came back and told me you should be on YouTube. I said, I don't even know anything about YouTube. and he decided to produce the first 25 videos I did. Then he took off. I put it on pause for a minute. I came back 2 years later, stronger than ever. And now I have I think I'm at 100 videos now of different videos that people can watch to stay motivated through the recovery process. We all have moments when we feel down. We all have moments when we feel like we don't want to do it. But here's the key. If you have something you can turn into to motivate you and get you going, that's going to take you another step closer to the success you desire.
Yes, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, this was an episode of the Just Believe podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you once again, Deryl. I appreciate this.
Herbie, thank you again, man. God bless you in the work you're doing.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. Peace, y'all.